Hello everyone, Alec Elger, the SideQuest Gamer here, and welcome to another episode of the SideQuest Gamer Review Show. And like I said last episode, I've been in the mood for platformers, and I think I picked a good one. And we're returning to the Mushroom Kingdom, the Mario universe, because of course I'm reviewing Super Mario World. You know, the one with Yoshi, everybody knows that one. It's the masterpiece everyone claims it to be. But is it really a masterpiece? Well, let's find out. The early 90s were a great time to be a gamer, at least that's what the 90s kids tell me, but I'll believe them in this case because in 1990, America saw the release of the long-awaited Super Mario Bros. 3. It was a success to say the least, selling at least 11 million copies worldwide. It took everything Super Mario Bros. Introduced and a little bit of Super Mario Bros. 2 and improved everything, completely reinventing the wheel. New power-ups, amazing level design, level variety, overworld map serving as a level select, visuals looking good even by today's standards, suspenseful boss battles, and upbeat chiptunes. If that wasn't the highlight of the early 90s, next year the Super Nintendo Entertainment System would launch with a follow-up to Super Mario Bros. 3, but the big question is, how do you follow up an act that is seemingly impossible to follow? How do you top perceived perfection? Well, the time for Nintendo to up their hardware was now. Heck, the Sega Genesis has been out in America since 1989. So in 1991, North America saw the release of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Because despite revitalizing the console gaming market in North America, apparently the Nintendo Entertainment System wasn't super. No. This one is the super one. Yeah, way to insult the predecessor, Nintendo. Upon release, this 16-bit console had 5 launch titles, with one of them even being a pack-in title. There was Gradius 3, the space shoot-'em-up that brings the arcade experience to your home, but now you don't have to steal money from your mom's purse for quarters. There was SimCity, bringing a taste of PC gaming over to the Super Nintendo. There was Pilot Wings, which, let's face it, was built around to show off the SNES Mode 7 feature to give the illusion of 3D in a 2D plane. Nothing wrong with that. We all know F-Zero as one of the more celebrated racing games on the console. This also used Mode 7 and is one of the few Mode 7 games I can honestly say still holds up. But we all know what the crown jewel among these 5 launch titles is going to be. You read the title, right? It's Super Mario World. What else did you expect? The game was in development for around 3 years with a team of 16 people under the direction of Takashi Tezuka, and produced by Shigeru Miyamoto, of course. Same developer as before, being Nintendo R&D 4, but now they're known as Nintendo Entertainment Analysis and Development. Try saying that 5 times fast! And what's interesting about this title is that the hardware the SNES had allowed for Shigeru Miyamoto and company to finally give Mario the dinosaur companion he wanted him to have since the original Super Mario Bros. And Super Mario World sold very well. I mean, it helps it was a Super Nintendo pack-in title, but it did sell 20 million copies within its lifetime, outselling its predecessor by 9 million, and to this day declared to be one of the best entries in the series, if not the best. But from my personal experience, I played it after the first 4 games, more specifically the All-Stars versions of the first 4 games. I wasn't initially impressed by it, probably because I didn't go after the alternate exits, making my adventure rather short, but I decided to give it a second chance by buying the GBA remake and enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. So then I went back and played the SNES version and enjoyed it more and more as I replayed it, but it's been a while, maybe over a year since I last played it. With the introduction over, let's finally delve into this game. The game starts out with a cheery theme that already sounds like an evolution of chiptune music. This is the MIDI format where you can actually play instruments and it would be compressed into a format that the SNES sound chip would be able to produce. Goodbye chiptunes, you had a good run. Hello MIDI format. We also see our iconic hero Mario running around and showing off the gameplay with his controls, which is an evolution of the shown off gameplay on the title screen of Super Mario Bros. 3, which just showed off Mario hopping on enemies and kicking a shell to Luigi. Not only that, for some kids who did wait for Nintendo to make their 16-bit console, this is likely the first 16-bit game they put their hands on. This is the first 16-bit game they played that they can call their own. This title screen, while we take it for granted today, must have been forever ingrained into the minds of those who've seen it for the first time in 1991. Look at all the colors, look at the sprite detail. Even if you played a Genesis, you'll still be impressed by the 256 colors possible. This is 16-bit Mario, and it's only the first few seconds of starting the game. Anyways, you start a new game. Wait, you can now save your game like The Legend of Zelda? Anyways, it begins with a text box actually telling you the story of the game, instead of solely relying on the manual to tell it. This text box tells you that the princess is missing and Bowser is added again. It's simple, but it gets the job done. I mean, it's not the first game to tell you the story in-game, as games like Zelda 1 have done that in 1986, and there's probably earlier games that did that as well. But for a platformer where the story is not the main focus, this is a pretty neat touch to the game. And it only continues on from there. In Yoshi's Island Stage 2, where you meet Yoshi for the first time, he mentions how Bowser trapped him and his friends in eggs, showing Bowser's dedication in taking over Dinosaur Land. And more tidbits of story do get sprinkled in every time you beat a Koopaling castle stage and free that castle's captive Yoshi egg. They usually talk about the Koopaling that was defeated, but I'm focusing more on how Mario gets one of the 7 Yoshi eggs in a mission to not only rescue the princess, but also all of Yoshi's friends. It's pretty much the damsel in distress tropes you've come to expect, except the damsel and 7 reptiles are now in distress, not just the princess. You do rescue the eggs in each of the world's Koopaling castle, and it is kind of nice seeing yourself do these things as you progress, as if an extension of how Mario brought back the wands to the kings in the predecessor, giving you a sense of importance in Dinosaur Land. I mean, Mario does have these animations where he would kick the castle out and even wipe a castle out of existence. Literally. And on my first playthrough, I kind of got a laugh out of these cutscenes. Not so much anymore, but it's still rather charming and shows effort went into not just the gameplay, but the story department, as basic as it is. But it's nonetheless charming in execution. Anyways, you've started the game and now you're in this overworld map. It's drawn to look more three-dimensional than the likes of the overworld maps in the predecessor, which I already like, but it's all interconnected where if you go to the left path and beat the Switch Palace, you can see World 2 from a distance, or go in a secret exits pathway which eventually leads to a warp pipe. You're on a path on a cliff that's overlooking the final world being the Valley of Bowser. You can't reach it yet as you're stuck on the path you're on, but it's kind of immersive catching sight of where you're headed, as it makes the overworld actually feel like a world. Perhaps that's why the game is called what it's called. I know I said I preferred the segmented overworld in Super Mario Bros. 3 because there was more going on in it, but I don't think I feel that way anymore. I think I underestimated Super Mario World's overworld and didn't give it as much credit as it deserved. Yeah, it kind of sucks that there's no Toad Houses or Wandering Hammer Bros patrols, but between the alternate exits actually changing the journey there and how it's all interconnected, I think that's honestly a fine enough sacrifice. Not to mention the top secret area you can unlock with one of the alternate exits kind of functions like a Toad House, where you're given 5 blocks, 2 containing a fire flower and 2 containing a feather cape, and the center block containing Yoshi. Super Mario World, even at the start, continues 3's tradition of making progression choice-based. Do you go to the left path or the right path? As a first-time player, you don't know what's up ahead until you reach that destination, but you only really get a choice based on skill, since it rewards exploration of the level. The yellow ones have 1 exit, but the red ones have 2 exits. Most of the ghost houses also have 2 exits, and I personally like this idea of having to earn your alternate pathway instead of just it being given to you. Despite the sense of freedom this game's overworld gives you, there's a surprising absence of the item menu from Super Mario Bros. 3, which I would have thought World would just evolve rather than throw that concept away. Sure, the ability where you can select an item you acquired from a minigame or Toad House and activate that before starting the level is gone. But if you do collect a power-up while fully leveled, it gets stored in a box until you press the select button, which is very useful in later levels. It's a rather odd change, but given how there's only the Fire Suit and Super Cape being the only 2 max abilities Mario can acquire as opposed to Mario Bros. 3's Frog Suit, Fire Suit, Tanuki Suit, and Hammer Suit, it's a change that doesn't affect my overall enjoyment, and only just takes away a bit of strategy Super Mario Bros. 3 had. However you start the game, you'll eventually have to play through Yoshi Island 2, which is a lot of people's first level of the game. Yoshi Island 2 and beyond will have these tutorial blocks that basically tell you how to play the game, teaching you the general mechanics of it. No scripted tutorial levels that take away control from the player. No, this is all entirely optional, but let me tell you, it is extremely useful to check all of these boxes so you can learn everything you need to know about the game, or things you didn't know you wanted. I like this because a veteran player like me can just breeze past these boxes with further playthroughs, not worrying about annoying tutorial segments that tend to plague more modern games. I get that no one wants to be stuck in a part of the game that could have been resolved by information you missed, but the solution is not holding the player's hand in this way. These sets of levels being the first world is a good way to start the game, if any. You get reacquainted with the power-ups like the mushrooms and fire flowers should you unlock it, while learning about new additions to this game. You're introduced to your green dinosaur friend named Yoshi, which is kind of an extension of Mario's given abilities. When you do find him and ride him around the level, he is able to eat enemies and spit out their shells as an attack towards other enemies, which is as hilarious and fun as it sounds. Depending on the shell color of the Koopa you swallow, green ones are just spat back out, red ones turn into 3 dividing flames, blue ones allow you to fly around, and yellow ones just give you a stomp ability. And later in the game when you go to Star World, you can unlock different color Yoshis that depending on the color can eat any Koopa and have the power depending on Yoshi's color this time, whereas blue Yoshi always flies, red Yoshi always spits fire, and yellow Yoshi always stomps. Poor green Yoshi is nothing special, which is why I often use him as a jump boost so he can only fall to his death. Yeah, I know I'm mean, but all the Yoshis have to pull their weight somehow in this game. And like Mario's abilities, you can bring Yoshi over to the next stage, but as soon as you access the castle stage, you learn that some stages like castles and later fortresses and ghost houses make you leave Yoshi outside, but thankfully you can have him back after you're done with the stage, which is very relieving. The first world gives you a taste of the level design you should expect, but not all of them per se. There's the usual grasslands with a collection of enemies, and there's of course the levels that have water-based platforming, and the castle stages put up quite a unique challenge from grabbing onto a chain link wall and climbing to the end, to facing one of the 7 Koopalings who, while have a basic attack pattern, can be the end of you if you mess up. It's kind of like a retelling of the original Super Mario Bros. With this level setup, but the second world being Donut Plains is where this game feels like it truly starts. For one, the first level introduces the flying Koopas, and I mean the cape ones. The Koopas with the flashing capes contain a cape feather, and even one of the warp pipes teaches you how to use the cape feather with a very open space to fly around in. It takes some getting used to, but once you master the controls, you'll be able to take full advantage of what the game has to offer. It works for flying through a level and as an offensive tool against enemies since the cape's attack has a pretty good range. Some have pointed out that it may be overpowered, but I disagree since there are many enemies like the flying platform Hammer Brothers and the tough charging Chuck enemies that could easily hit you, resulting in the loss of your cape feather. As I said before, the alternate exits can be found in some ghost houses as well as all the red dot worlds, and mostly usually require a key in order to exit. As I said before, I like this because it makes the levels feel a lot bigger than they are, but warning, some keys are inaccessible unless you went after one of the 5 colored switch palaces, which are usually found in an alternate exit pathway. It's a nice way to rake up some lives and actually change the game for the better. For example, the later castle and fortress stages will be a lot harder thanks to the thwip and thwomp enemies being everywhere, but you can trap some of them by activating the color switches, which makes it a lot easier to traverse through. Don't get me wrong, the later castle stages are still very fair and challenged, but it doesn't change that you're actually rewarded for going out of your way to find these switch palaces, and some players will do all in their power to get that very reward. Donut Plains also introduces what will become a series staple, the ghost houses, and they're actually a breath of fresh air as it isn't simply a matter of running to the end, but how you get to the end. Some ghost houses will require activating a blue switch to reveal a blue door that would eventually lead to an exit. It's kind of an extension of the second to last castle level from Super Mario Bros. 3, but it's nonetheless a good and original extension of that idea because it makes you think about how you want to use your surrounding environment to reach the solution. and depending if you found the alternate exit in Donut Plains 1 or not, you can experience the first of this game's water levels. Despite the absence of a frog suit, I think they fare pretty well. I like how if you enter them with a cape feather, you have more control over Mario, and since the game's whacking ability works just as well as it did on land, the fish enemies, which are a usual nuisance to Mario in the previous games, are taken out easily. But to make up for it, there are these Rip Van Fish enemies that, when awoken, will follow you around more than a creepy stalker. They're also pretty fast, which can sometimes lead to heart-pounding situations that would work best if the Scary Movie string instruments played during those situations. Jokes aside, these underwater levels provide a really nice challenge for even newcomers who've played a lot of the predecessors and only add to the variety of level themes. World 3, the Vanilla Dome, is where the difficulty noticeably increases now that you know most of the game's general mechanics. It contains a set of primarily cave levels that gave me quite a challenge when I first played it. They're not difficult by any means, and this is a very welcome change, not just aesthetically but also in terms of level design. It's also fascinating in the regard of how there's more than one way to progress further, with the alternate exit in the first level of this world leading to what I call the Vanilla Secret Pathway, which leads to the first of the fortress levels in the game. These levels function like a castle level, except instead of facing one of the 7 Koopalings, you instead face 4 Triceratops creatures known as the Reznor. The reason I point this out is that the normal pathway would lead to the 3rd castle, which leads to the Cheese Bridge section of the 4th world I'll just call the Twin Bridges. You can progress from there to the 4th castle, but if you go to the Vanilla Secret Pathway, you'll traverse to the Butter Bridge section of the Twin Bridges world that lead directly to the 4th castle. I love options like that because it makes the quest all the more epic and replayable. You can make it so no 2 playthroughs are the same in terms of progression, but as for the Twin Bridges world itself, it's definitely more challenging as the bridge themed levels have many bottomless pits you have to avoid, as well as these saw blade enemies you have to avoid while riding on an on-rails platform. It definitely has more emphasis put on precise platforming than the preceding worlds, which if you ask me is not a bad thing at all. But World 5 Force of Illusion is where the branching pathways introduced in Vanilla Dome are even more present. The stages themselves take place in Wiggler and Goomba infested forests, and they're not even difficult, no. But there are a lot of levels with alternate exits, which would take a while if you're trying to find all 96 exits. These stages don't offer much in terms of evolving the platforming challenges. In fact, platforming seems rather minimal in these stages with the exception of the Fortress, Ghost, and Castle stages, but the challenge is substituted with a barrage of new enemies like the Goombas that no longer can just be stomped on, and the Wiggler, unless you have Yoshi with you to swallow it whole, cannot be killed, and jumping on them once would make them angrier and faster, so these stages are still following the progressive difficulty curve cleverly with these new enemy types, and I applaud the designers for doing so. But Chocolate Island, the 6th world in the game, is where things can get confusing for a first-time player. In fact, this section of the game made me take a break from the game for the longest time. The stages themselves are fine enough, introducing the fire-breathing Dino Rhino enemies, but Chocolate Island Stage 2 gives you instructions on how coins collected in time remaining would affect the level, and boy was it correct. Depending on these variables, the rooms and the levels will either change for the better or for worse, and I don't know why this level gave me so much trouble as a kid. Now as an adult, I can admire this change in progressing through the level. It's just for this one level, but it's one level not to forget. In fact, if you find the secret exit, you'll actually skip right to the castle, which is really neat. Although you'll still have to go through at least one of the chocolate secret levels. As for the other stages, there seems to be a lot of diagonal platforms to jump onto, and perhaps that's to spice things up since simply standing still would make you slip off of it and into the molten chocolate. I hope that's chocolate. This is where originality is starting to fade, which becomes more apparent when you enter the Valley of Bowser. You first access it after Wendy's castle, and enter the sunken ship. This level is pretty interesting because it combines the ghost house enemies with the underwater levels, which is as tricky as it sounds. It's not too difficult, but it's symbolic of how the game is just going to test everything you knew previously and apply them to these final main levels. This is also the last original level in the game, in my honest opinion. And Valley of Bowser, what can I honestly say? We're back underground with levels similar to Vanilla Dome, except now there are giant moles in some of the levels, which is neat. And despite going back to a previous theme for most of these stages, some of them are designed to be really tricky, so you're still given the sense of a good challenge. Bowser's Castle especially because of how non-linear it is designed. Look, you're given 4 rooms to choose from the start. There are 8 selectable rooms total, and you just have to play through 2 of them to reach the final boss. Part of the fun with the final stage is, say, if you're having a hard time with one of the rooms, you can just move on to one of the other 3, and same goes for rooms 5 through 8. Never have we seen castle design like this before, except maybe Mario 3's castle and the 2 different Bowser statue rooms, but that's about it. And however you get there, it just makes the journey to the final boss being Bowser all the more enjoyable, although there aren't any checkpoints, so I hope you recognize Bowser's attack pattern quickly. I do prefer Super Mario Bros. 3's final castle a little more because it's more streamlined and arguably more climactic with that epic final boss battle against Bowser, but that doesn't make the final castle any less of an incredible journey. But of course, there are players who are so bad at this game that the final castle is just impossible for them. Well, to those players, I say boo-hoo, get good. What I actually meant was, if the final castle the normal way is just too hard for you, you can thank the non-linear progression of the game because there's a backdoor to the final castle. But you'll have to earn it. For the journey to the shameless backdoor of Bowser's final castle, you'll have to find the rather obtuse location of the secret exit. You'll also have to play through a really tricky fortress level containing so many spiked pillars crashing down every 2 seconds. And after all of that, you're rewarded with the backdoor to the final castle, and get this, it lets you skip a great portion of the final castle. You don't have to go through 2 of the 8 rooms, and unlike playing the final castle normally, there's actually a checkpoint near the end right before the boss door. That is a cool reward. I don't go after the backdoor until I do it the honest way, but the fact that there's just this many options to play the final castle, it gives you, the player, many options to end your incredible journey, starting from the tropical island of Yoshi to the treacherous valley of Bowser. Or maybe the journey wasn't long and incredible, maybe it was very short. It really depends on how you played the game. Let me explain. This improperly segues back to the non-linearity I described with alternate exits many times in this review. To describe this in further detail, we should rewind back to World 2 Donut Plains. If you go to the Donut secret route, you'll discover a ghost house, and should you find the area to the secret exit, you'll fight a boss battle against Big Boo. Once it is defeated, you'll see a pathway end at a star icon. You, being the curious player, of course, would enter the star and discover a whole new world. Welcome to Star World, where 5 bonus levels and 5 star roads are present. There are 4 other star roads connecting to the world throughout the game. There's the one you accessed in Donut Plains, there's the one in Vanilla Dome, one in the Forest of Illusion, one in the Twin Bridges area, and one in the Valley of Bowser. You need to find the alternate exits to preceding levels in order to access these star roads, whereas you can't just use the star road as a shortcut to Vanilla Dome because there's no path to go on to. But there's always a path leading to the final castle in the 5th star road, which means all you have to do is find the alternate exits in the first 4 Star World levels, which isn't that hard to be honest, meaning it's entirely possible to beat this game defeating only one of the Koopaling castles. That's how non-linear this game's progression can be. These Star World levels are kind of basic themselves, as all they introduce is the different colored Yoshis, but if you find the alternate exits to all 5 Star World levels, a 6th star road will appear and will take you to the infamous Special World. These levels are really challenging. They require mastery of the controls, they require mastery of timing, and you will get your butt handed to you on a silver platter. This is the mighty obstacle between you and your bragging rights of completing Super Mario World. Oh, and did I mention these levels are freaking hard? These levels have varying degrees of difficulty, and as to which levels are the hardest are more subjective if anything. There's not much to gnarly, as all you have to do is get to the top and go to the next room, step on a switch, finish the level. Way Cool just involves going on the correct pathway and avoid the black blobs. Awesome can be tricky thanks to the ice physics, but if you know when to step on the blue switch to turn coins into platforms, therefore being able to reach the question mark box containing an invincibility star, there's not much to it other than to be careful when platforming. but Tubular is often cited as the hardest of these special world levels. I honestly disagree, but due to the charging chucks throwing baseballs at you while floating over a bottomless pit, and if you get hit you'll deflate and fall to your death, yeah, I can see how that would frustrate some players, but for some reason I can usually get this level done in a few tries depending on the kind of day I'm having. But the last 4 stages, more specifically the 6th and 7th levels, will put up one heck of an insane challenge. Groovy just offers a barrage of the hardest enemies you've fought in the game, and they did rob me of a few of my lives, but that's just for my skill. But Mondo, I hate this level so much. The water slows you down, and there's fish everywhere, not to mention a fast-moving flying hammer bro that can easily take you out with a few loose hammers since the water is slowing you down. I hate this level so much. Why is it designed like this? And the hardest is yet to come. Outrageous is literally that. It's outrageously hard. It's set in a Wiggler and Goomba infested level, but here's the thing. There's bullet bills everywhere. And you have to escort a spring to the highest orange pipe so you can jump over and deal with the rest of the level, which is easier than the first half, but it still catches you off guard occasionally. This may be the hardest for me, but unlike Mondo, I feel it's more fairly designed. And you'd think the 8th level, the special world, would be the hardest, but it's really not. There are Super Brothers everywhere, and there's a strict time limit, but if you have Yoshi, you can eat the level exclusive green apples to add time, and I won't lie, after going through all of that in the special world, it's really nice to see the coin message say, "You are a super player." Yeah, that's right, I'm a super player. So if you ever question my skill in video games, well, I beat these special levels, and Nintendo themselves acknowledge that I am a super player. Yeah, that's right, you can't question my skill anymore. But overall, these levels are insanely challenging. I don't really think these stages are poorly designed. Well, except for Mondo. That level is just plain cheap. Cheap. Get it? That's the name of the fish in the Mario universe? Tough crowd. But it's still hard, where the reward isn't really worth it that much.
Come on, Alec, the special world wasn't that hard. You just need to get good.
Frank, get the f*** out of this video. I don't need your attitude.
Subscribe to Super Frank Plays. There's some Kaizo Super Mario World there, a game that Alec definitely cannot play.
Oh, Frank, so shameless with the self-promotion. Anyways, your reward for all of that hard work is a Halloween sprite swap. No, I'm not even kidding. All of the Koopas are dressed up as Mario, the piranha plants are now pumpkins, and the bullet bills are crows. Also, the overworld seems to have reversed colors, so there's that. Like I said, other than the cosmetic changes, it really doesn't matter in the long run. The levels, other than the enemies, still look the same. I suppose if you played these levels ahead of time in the beginning, that may incentivize a playthrough with the rest of the game having these sprite swaps. Anyways, with 9 worlds full of open, content-rich levels, I have to say they're designed well for the most part. I am a little disappointed that the level themes are rather limited to just mushroom tops with either day or night backgrounds, underground caverns, forests, ghost houses, castles, and a ton of grasslands, because for worlds with food names, it would be cool to at least have a distinct background and foreground to go with them. I'm not asking for the worlds to be identical to its predecessor. Believe me, with the new Super Mario Bros. Games, I think they've borrowed enough from Mario 3. I do like how, with the exception of the grasslands, most of these level types are things the series hasn't seen before in this manner. Another disappointment with this game is the boss battles. Now, I will say they're an improvement over Super Mario Bros. 3 in terms of being more interesting to take down, but they're also a downgrade in terms of challenge. Sure, the 3rd and 6th boss battles, being Lemmy and Wendy respectively, are some of the better bosses in the game because they pop out of the pipes alongside 2 fake Koopaling puppets, making you keep on guessing where the real one is while avoiding 1 fireball for Lemmy and 2 fireballs for Wendy's boss battle. And Ludwig is interesting because he can range from shooting fireballs at you to attempting to hit you with his sliding shell, but the 1st and 7th bosses, being Iggy and Larry respectively, are on this platform that tilts up left or up right every few seconds with them throwing beach balls at you, but it only takes a few hits to send them into the lava. How underwhelming is that? And don't get me started on Roy and Morton as they climb up the walls as they progressively close in on you and try to drop from the ceiling and crush you, but they're so easy as they go down in 3 hits. There's really nothing to them. And would you believe me if I said even those weren't the worst bosses? The fortress levels have these 4 Reznor enemies moving on 4 clockwise moving platforms, and yes, while the danger is them breathing fire on you, all they amount to is hitting their platforms from under them, throwing them off the level. That's it. And it's the same for every fortress level. There are no new environmental hazards making this fight more interesting. No, it's the exact same as you started with the first fortress level. And Big Boo, all you have to do is throw blue boxes at it. Blue boxes you're standing on. If you can't figure that one out, then you're lying. You did figure it out and you did take out Big Boo easily. At least the final boss, being Bowser in his clown car, is a pretty epic fight as there's 3 phases to him. One where he moves left and right, having you fling his collapsed mechs on top of him. The second phase is where he's always above you, making your attack a little harder to pull off since his clown car is trying to block the thrown mechs. And the final phase has you avoid his clown car's crushing attack. This is how you design a challenging but fun to fight boss battle. Unfortunately, over half of them are not that fun to fight because they're so easy. And while the underwhelming boss battles don't detract from the overall experience, it is to show the game isn't entirely perfect. The graphics, while I like the art style it went for, it seems rather simple, which is understandable for an SNES launch title. But I do prefer the cartoony art style of Super Mario Bros. 3 to be perfectly honest, as the sprites seem to have more personality going for them, and I really like the color choices used in that game. That's not to say Super Mario World's art style is worse by any means. No, the game, graphically speaking, is inarguably better than any 8-bit game, but there is a difference between graphics and aesthetics, as graphics delve into the more technical aspects of the image shown to you, while aesthetics delves into what the image shown means to you emotionally. With Super Mario World's aesthetics, I'm not really a fan of the Koopaling sprites in comparison to the predecessors' versions of them, especially with Morton's design, as they don't seem sinister at all. Mario and Yoshi look fine, but then there's Bowser with a green body instead of yellow, which is rather odd if you played the last game. These may seem like little nitpicks, but I just want to illustrate why someone like me would prefer an 8-bit game like Super Mario Bros. 3's aesthetics than Super Mario World's. The soundtrack is quite charming, and it's often used as background music in YouTube, so much so that it arguably has become a part of internet culture. The overworld themes for each world are short tracks that loop quickly, but like the previous game, they give off an atmosphere before even entering the levels, just to give you an expectation of what emotions you'll be feeling. From the rather cheery Yoshi Island and Donut Plains themes, to the vast and empty Vanilla Dome theme, to the enigmatic Forest of Illusion theme, to the sinister Valley of Bowser theme. The level themes themselves do an effective job at capturing the emotion you're feeling for each of the stage's settings, usually having a variation of what I like to call the Super Mario World melody. Like for the grass levels, of course the track of those types of levels would be cheery and upbeat, while the underground levels would have a drum-dominant track with a lower version of the Super Mario World melody, almost as if it's playing above ground and you're hearing it from below, or how the underwater levels is as happy as the surface levels, but it's much slower because with Mario swimming underwater, he moves much slower. The Ghost House theme is fast, but gives off a more haunted vibe, like a sinister supernatural presence everywhere in this mysterious abandoned house. And the castle theme does a great job of being fast-paced, but giving off a more sinister vibe, like an obvious danger at every corner, and less mysterious than that of the ghost houses. Overall, I like how the music is perfectly paced in addition to having just the right instruments to convey the correct atmosphere for the respective level settings. Not only that, but it matches the emotions the player is feeling perfectly when playing through these levels. If the cheery grassland melody wasn't enough of a fun listen, just hop on Yoshi and bongo drums are added into the percussion, making it even more fun to listen to. Is it my favorite soundtrack in the Mario series? Well, I don't know, but I do know I love it, and I can say for certain Koji Kondo outdid himself. He apparently used only an electronic keyboard for the soundtrack, even compressed into a MIDI format for the cartridge. They all sound great and hold up to this day. And that can be pretty much applied to this game game in general. When looking at Super Mario World over 25 years past its release date, despite being a launch title only scratching the surface of what the Super Nintendo can do, the designers worked with the given limitations and made what is said to be one of the best platformers of all time. And to this day, people will argue that this game has yet to be outmatched. Heck, some will say it will never be outmatched. And after looking at each and every aspect this game has to offer, I can honestly see why. I still prefer the predecessor, but Super Mario Bros. 3 was a tough act to follow, and I think World successfully followed it with a different but unique enough experience. And for that alone, despite not liking it as much as Super Mario Bros. 3, that's only slightly because on its own merits, I think Super Mario World is a masterful game. I cannot recommend this enough, and I would usually say, oh, you should go out and play it, buy it on the Wii U eShop for $8 or something, but let's face it, you probably already played this game and love it just as much as I do. Or maybe not, it depends. I can't really count for your taste, and I can only account for my own tastes. And if you're one of the rare few who haven't played this game yet, I don't normally judge you or anything, but what the heck are you waiting for? A sign? Well, here's your sign. Go play it! That's all I have to say. And for a game this early in the console's lifespan, it even has quite the legacy of its own from getting a cartoon based off it.
For that, my ravenous reptile, you can go see Mama Fire Plant and bring back some fireballs to start the barbecue.
Oh, Cucumber, Mama Fire Plant lives on the other side of the river, and I'm scared of water.
Of questionable quality, this game arguably started the Sega vs. Nintendo console war in North America. Sonic the Hedgehog came out a few months before in the summer of 1991, and guess what? That became the Sega Genesis's pack-in title, replacing previous occupant Altered Beasts. So with Sega and Nintendo having colorful characters starring in universally well-received pack-in titles, practically selling these consoles, this console war will progress through its marketing. I seriously doubt it was a playground war as exaggerated as the gaming journalists make it out to be. I won't deny the marketing had some influence over the console preferences, starting an annoying trend of fanboyism, but I seriously doubt anyone with a functional cerebrum would choose one and refuse to play the other console if they had the option to own both consoles, just for brand loyalty reasons. Because I'm sorry to say, but most of you back then, you didn't work for Nintendo or Sega. They don't care about you. They only want your money and will do anything to get that money. The reason being, retro gaming YouTubers often talk about going to their best friends' houses when they were kids, playing the other console they never owned for their own unique gaming library. So if they were willing to play the other console they don't have, then they must have liked it for some reason. They may have their preferences as to which console is better, but I seriously doubt they turned their noses away from it dismissively as the marketing wanted you to believe. Regardless, the console war has begun in the marketing, and Super Mario World may have started it, since it was a sign that Nintendo was going to do all in their power to win the 4th generation console wars despite Sega's head start, and Sega isn't going to bow down so easily after being in 2nd place for so long in the 3rd generation. Thanks to this amazing game, my platformer thirst has been quenched. So until next time, thank you all so much for watching, and remember to stay awesome!